Thanks for checking out another new podcast from AMP. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, and I'm the news editor with the AMP publications team. AMP is the shorthand acronym for the Association for Materials Protection and Performance, of which Coatings Pro and Materials Performance are member magazines within our publications group. Today, we're chatting with Russell Roden, president at Atlantic Design. Russell, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. For anyone who might not be familiar with you or the company, let's start by talking about your niche within the industry. I know you all have been around for over 30 years now, so what was the initial inspiration for launching the company? Was there a particular product or innovation that you were sort of focused on? And just if you could speak to the evolution of Atlantic Design over these 3+ decades and the path that's ultimately led you to today.
Yes, man. Thanks for having me. I guess to get started, I had kind of worked in this industry since I was at college, University of Houston. I took a part-time job actually designing blast rooms for the oil field. These were all stationary blast rooms. It's a part-time job, and then it kind of grew from there. And then upon graduation, we started getting into the mobile equipment, and then we had actually relocated and came up in here to the East Coast. And then, like I said, about 30 years ago, and that's when I was kind of working on my own and working with other companies and working on our own, and just kind of planets came into alignment. And there's was birth a necessity or a need for Atlantic Design, and we started out as kind of service and upgrades and parts for existing equipment, and then we kind of grew it from there. So my wife and I just got together. We started in the dining room, and then kind of the rest is history.
So, what were you seeing out in the blasting and coatings markets at that time that made you think there was room for something better? What was the background as far as the thought process and I guess the formation in the early years and the development?
Yes, as like I said, we were out primarily working on other equipment, and we kept seeing the same kind of problems cropping up, in that they were all just kind of, they were purpose engineered. They were kind of like you would get components from other industries, and you'd push them together and maybe make a few minor modifications to have it work in this industry. So there wasn't really anything that was purposely made and for this industry. And as an engineer, I was noticing that, hey, we needed to get a more purpose-driven, specific-driven equipment for this industry, and try to get rid of some of the problems that the operators were, talking to us about. Like, this equipment was very mechanical with the bucket elevators, screw conveyors, belt conveyors, and we had noticed we did pneumatic conveying, that pneumatic would maybe be a better approach. It's a little bit more similar to the blasting and painting. So it's just kind of like as we're out on these job sites, literally we're standing shoulder to shoulder with the guys that are trying to keep this running. We were seeing the problems they were experiencing, seeing if we could develop, like I said, a kind of a purpose-driven equipment for this industry.
Was there a turning point in there where you realized that Atlantic Design was really starting to make its mark? Was there a moment or two that you started to realize that you really had something there?
Yes, there actually was. So as we wanted to bring in some safety and performance into the industry, it meant that we had to take like a different approach. So like I said, we kind of started making our own classifiers and modifying or designing like dust collectors, which are used everywhere, but making them more specific to this industry. So as we started, putting that together, we would kind of take it piece by piece, because we didn't have really the manpower to completely redo everything at once. And so we took it piece by piece, and we were increasing the safety and the performance, and also the productive capacity, because the other systems were kind of small, and the customers were needing more and more. More and more production to keep up with the demands. So anyway, as we were getting going, and it was slow in the beginning, like I said, we were just doing parts and service, and then we started kind of getting into working with companies where we would change the equipment partially, and then finally, once we sort of got into what I consider pretty much a complete ADI system. We were actually bidding against our main competitor at the time, and the customer came in and actually was asking questions to us about how we were compared to our competitor, our main competitor, and he was also giving reflecting back the answers that they gave to him, how theirs were different and better than ours. We actually didn't get that order, but I'm telling you, when I left that meeting, I was 12 inches off the ground. My feet were hitting the ground because that was the first time I'd ever been in a bid where the customer actually asked our competitors to explain why theirs was different than ours. Because up until then, we were just able to be discarded and discounted because we were just young and small. And it was like, that's it. That's the beginning of the end of us just being pushed aside, that they're going to have to answer. And that truly was the turning point when we started getting some recognition for our designs and capabilities.
So let's talk at a high level. When it comes to reclaiming abrasive grit on blasting jobs, what are some of the big challenges these days, and why is effective screening such a crucial part of that process?
Okay, yeah, the course of challenges they're kind of the same, but they're always changing, and that is everyone's needing, higher production, faster equipment, hopefully smaller footprint and safety on top of that. So there's always the perennial challenges are, getting the equipment back to the unit, dealing with the elements, if the weather, if it gets wet, if you've got to your bridge, like we had bridges where you had to go 2,000 feet away, like the equipment was 2,000 feet away from the work area. Having equipment that operators can understand and keep rolling. So that's kind of the perennial problems that come up, just every year and on every project. And then what we're seeing now is that the number of the projects now are a lot more restricted into accessibility and into performance and what they need. And so what we've actually developed with our unique system of not using the mechanical components, but mainly our pneumatic transfer, and along with the other designs components, allows us to be super flexible with our design. Or if they need a real vertical stack because they don't have much footprint, but they got a lot of height, or if they need a horizontal footprint because they're like over the road, so we can take our standard components and we can reconfigure it into what they need. And so what is really neat, for example, we worked with a contractor a couple of years ago. They got the Contractor of the Year award on a project where we were cleaning like an underground tunnel for a subway system. And it was a fast-paced project that had to be, the equipment had to be custom made to fit on, or custom arranged to fit on, like 5 different, kind of little, rail systems, if you wanna call it. So it stretched way out like 300 feet long because we were real short, and we had to get all into the tunnel and back out of the tunnel, and doing that all real time with the equipment. So because of our designs and, like, especially the screening we're talking about, it's hard to really move abrasive around unless you've actually had the good screening. So we were able to split that into just multiple pieces. I think there were like 10 pieces, and they were able to get it in, get it out, get it done. We've done another one with a large carrier where we had to like get into specific places. So what's unique is that we have these really good components like the screen barrier, like our magnetic drum, and that way we can custom arrange them to fit into the specific designs and arrangements that are needed now. So we're kind of getting beyond how the one size fits all. How can you better adapt this to fit my specific project and application without reinventing the wheel?
So at a high level, when it comes to that screen veer system, it sounds like what you're saying is that your system is a lot more customized to unique needs, right? Relative to some of the other screening methods that are out there.
Yes, I would say it's more customizable and meaning that we don't typically we got like 4 screens and 2 different magnet I mean, 1 different magnet, and so we take those standard components and we'll custom, arrange them for so it's the same end, I was just it's not like each screen is customized, but we customize the arrangement, and because of the compact and performance of the screen bear in conjunction with the others, we could fit it into much more a higher big variety of applications that normally you couldn't get to without that kind of flexibility and performance.
Yeah, flexibility is probably the better word. Just something beyond and deeper than the one size fits all approach.
That is correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that's probably been the biggest move in the last few years is that, we have specific needs for marine that are different from over the road, that are different from we're going into to hard to reach places by airplane. So yeah, that has kind of been the name of the game.
All right. So I know another one of the big differences in your system is the use of pneumatic grit transfer instead of the traditional bucket elevators. Can you walk us through why Atlantic Design went with this approach and what are some of the advantages there when it comes to performance, reliability, and maintenance for the end users?
Yeah, the main reason why we went away from these mechanical systems is that they're real restrictive in the way that they can work, and they typically require some pretty high powered electricity or air motors. So you really don't want to have a generator and three-phase electricity and air motors unless you need it. So there was the start, there was just the flat out performance, and then second was the restrictiveness in application. I mean, you pretty much have to have this bucket elevator located here specific to the grid hopper. And then you could use a screw conveyor to maneuver it slightly, but you don't have really hardly any flexibility on design and arrangement. Plus, you lose a lot of head heights because we like to, especially over the road equipment, has got to needs to stay below 13.6 without requiring permits. So having the bucket elevators and stuff, you lose like 2 feet of height right off the bat. So they tend to be very hard to keep water tight. They tend to leak water pretty bad. They're pretty high maintenance, and because they're kind of self-destructive. And again, they're just so restrictive. Whereas a pneumatic concept, which we'd use dramatic in other areas when I was an engineer in other industries. And it uses basically all the same components as a blast pipe. And since the customer is already so familiar with air blasting, we just basically said, "Hey, you understand a blast pipe? Here, we're gonna use this for our grid transfer vessels, and it uses almost all the same components. So that way, again, they didn't have to learn anything new. They already understand it, and then that also gives the flexibility to go longer and higher and wider, and we can fill up to the roof. So that was really the biggest, it eliminated problems and at the same time gave us the flexibility and safety to go in other directions and basically bring, equipment to the market that's you're unable to bring any other way.
We're talking on this sponsored pod with Russell Roden, president at Atlantic Design. Let's shift our conversation to blast controls because I know that's an area of emphasis for you all at Atlantic Design. Your panels are generally known for the safety features, the reliability, specifically your four-wire deadman system. Can you explain what sets your controls apart? And also, I know you've got a couple of new things coming to market with the Apollo M Blast Light, the Deadman combo. Tell us about what you have coming out on the marketplace this year or in the months ahead.
Okay, yeah, and the blast controls were kind of like, everything else that we ran into when we first got into this equipment 20, 30 years ago, is it was just, basic off-on, some pneumatic, some electric. Even if they use the electric, it was just the simple off-on controls, and so when I'd be out on job sites, these people would have to the operator would have to get under the blast pots because they were trying to choke the valves or get it cleaned out. They'd hit the other hose, they'd get blasted in their arm, and now they're down at the emergency room getting all the grid picked out. So I was probably on 2 or 3 job sites that happened, And then we're just saying there's just got to be a better way to do this to get these people out of those dangerous situations. I mean, it's a dangerous, industry, and it's dangerous equipment, but try to keep the people out of that as much as possible. So we developed the four wire system, which allowed them to choke and blow down at the nozzle, which was maybe not the most unique. Other people had experimented and done it, but we actually developed at the time a cutting edge four wire dead man switch. We were the first one to offer that switch, work with another manufacturer to bring it to market. So by now having the four wire controls, we could use the four wire dead man switch, but we also have controls at the panel, primarily trying to keep the people out of the danger of underneath these blast spots. So we're able to adjust the grit from the panel so you're not underneath there getting blasted. We also have what we call our big mouth choke feature, so you can actually choke a grit valve without having to get in and turn the knob. So it was just the immediate need was to get the operator out of these dangerous environments. And then what it took to do that then allowed us to get into other areas, like I said, where we did it at the panel first, and then now we could do it at the dead man control, and then at the dead man switch. And so that allowed us to continue developing other features. One is that each blast nozzle or each blast control is independent. So if you have a problem with one or it shorts out, it doesn't take all the rest of them down. We develop counters and timers that help keep track of what's going on. And another neat thing is we actually have the ability to flicker a blast light individually, so this way, the pout operator and he can kind of communicate with the blaster, because the blaster will flicker his dead man switch to flicker light on the panel, which we were one of the first ones to put the light on the panel. That was one of the first things I ran into. Hey, we need to see who's with the new blast controls. We can't see who's flickering us. So everything's kind of grown out of necessity is the mother of invention, and then it all kind of grew from there. So then we were flickering back and forth, and back and forth, the operator and the blaster. And now then we actually have it where if you hit the emergency stop, you can take the light stays on so the blaster can get out. So one of our neatest new things we're excited about is we're coming out this year. It should be out within weeks. The Apollo M combination blast light. It's the dead man switch and blast light in one component. It's not for everyone, but for the ones that want it, it eliminates additional wiring. So now, again, you just have one wire that goes out that goes to your blast light and your dead man switch. You can use a 2-wire, 3-wire, 4-wire dead man switch, but you get all the safety and communications of the ADI controls. You don't have to have the full-blown 4-wire dead man to take advantage of so many of these features and controls like the dead mount, the big mouth choke. We have another feature where if they leave the dead man switch on and you power up the panel, it won't turn the blaster on. The dead man switch has to be turned off for 2 seconds before it can start. Now that we can do that all in one piece, we got the individual signaling. So it just basically is bringing communication, because the wireless communication stuff is very difficult. But this way, it's tried and proven where they've been doing this for 10, 20, 30 years now, so they can flicker back and forth, and we can do that reliably.
So, as far as technologies, which is what we've been discussing the last few minutes, is there anything new coming over the next few years that's potentially going to change the game when it comes to these abrasive recovery systems? I know there's no crystal ball, but just generally speaking, is there anything new on the technology front that you anticipate being a game changer in the years ahead?
Again, like everything else, I think some of it's just gonna be kinda the natural evolution and improvement of things, and then hopefully there's gonna be one or two, big big new kind of discoveries, so to speak. So I see that what we've seen at Atlantic Design over the last, decade is I think we'll see continuing improvements in the performance and safety and reliability of the components. There'll be new metallurgies, new bearings and stuff that'll help create that and make that better. And then also, I think that that with the better engineering, that the designs will become more and more and more flexible. So, like right now, our designs work with, steel grid or magnetic grid and non-magnetic grid. We're working on developing one that'll actually take damp grid. We already can work with a little bit of damp grid. So this way, when the grid gets wet, either steel grid or non-steel grid, that we can reuse it. I think that will be a big game changer. So you could start. So you can roll up with one machine. You can do steel grid, and you can blast it. You can do one shot blast with a vapor blast. You can even vapor blast and pull it back. We can also add the various pH, leveling additives to the blasting. And one other one that I think that we're working on that's going to, I think will be a game changer if we could pull it off, is a new screen design, because the wire is the bane of this industry. They have to wire all this stuff together in the containment, and that wire just gets into everything, and it's just trouble for every machine. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be able to develop a system that'll actually remove the wire from the abrasive. And man, if we could pull that off, that'll be huge. That'll be one of the biggest upgrades in the history of this industry, in my opinion.
Again, we're speaking with Russell Roden, winding down this sponsored pod. We've spoken for the last 15 minutes or so about the technology side of the business. I want to wind down our conversation with a little bit of focus on the equipment side. What are the core systems that you all manufacture, and what are the things that make them stand out on the job site?
I would say that probably our biggest, claim to fame core is the complete blasting and reclaim system. And that's actually that encompasses, four independent systems working together. You got the blast system, the air dryer system, the reclaim system, and the vacuum system, all on the same, all functioning as one system, whether it's all on one skid or trailer or even on multiple 5 or 6 skids or trailers. It pulls it together. So that's probably our number one, what we're known for the most. But interesting enough is that, we had to make our own vacuum systems. We had to make our own dust collector systems. So actually, even within those subcomponents, we've always made the vacuums of the dust collectors, and we're trying to branch out and bring that technology. So it's kind of like we've got the elevated technology to make the whole system. So now let's break that back down into the pieces so we can, better compete on just a standalone dust collector and the standalone vacuums. But we have come out and pioneered a lot of features that are now pretty standard in the industry. With the quick drop for the grid valves, we've been using double dub valves on vacuum systems since we started Atlantic Design, or since I was consulting for 30 years ago. So those are now all of a sudden very desirable, and we're seeing the competitors use them, but we've been doing them for 30 years. So I would like to say that we've kind of been ahead of the curve. We're an engineering, quality driven, performance safety driven company. We're not just here to sell you a piece of equipment. We're here to solve a need that you have. So I would say that that's probably our biggest feature. What we're known for the most is that when you have the unique, when you have a problem and you need a solution, then we're going to, work harder and come closer than anyone else in this industry to getting you what you need within the blasting, air drying, reclaim, and vacuuming technologies.
How are these types of systems designed to work together as an end-to-end solution? Because I know you all at Atlantic Design, you've got things in the area of blast and reclaim systems, you've got dust collectors, you've got industrial vacuums. What are the ways that these work together to offer a complete solution?
Okay, I think what makes us different from anything that's ever really existed, like I said in the beginning, when we were servicing the other equipment, there were big all-in-one machines, and they'd have like a central computing processor on it, and when you had one problem, everything went down, and that was a huge, huge problem. And so they needed it to be, because these contractors have got to keep running. And if they have to have someone standing here, pressing a button, they need to keep rolling. So we saw the need for a complete, kind of automatic or autonomous system, but not really with a central control. So the difference between ours and really pretty much everything else that's ever existed is while our systems will function as one complete, unified system, I say that it's automatic, but it's not automated. And what I mean by that is you don't have a central processor saying, do this, turn this, and do this. What happens is you start up the vacuum. Once you start vacuuming grid in, then the reclaim system then comes to life and it starts reclaiming. If there's just because the vacuum's running, nothing is happening on the reclaim side. But once grid starts coming in, you hit, the level sensors. I mean, obviously you turn it on, but I mean, you hit the level sensors, it kind of comes to life and then it starts doing what it does. And then it shoots it then over into the blasting system. So each of the systems can stand alone independently and work just fine, but then they can also work together as a single unit, again, because they complement each other. This brings it to here, this cleans it, and then it moves it to here. This blasts it, and it's laying out here on the ground. Now this one brings it back again, and so that way they work together, and one is not shutting the other one down, but it makes it, for our opinion and our experience, it makes it more reliable. It makes it easier to work on, easier because again, in the end, the operator has to make this work. I'm not the one out here. I've got an engineering degree and I'm pretty mechanical. I can make a lot of things run, but I'm not the one running it. I need to have the operator be comfortable and be safe, and everyone gets home tonight safely, and at the same time, get production and the performance that they need to keep the bridges and the water towers and the boats and the Navy and everyone running.
You mentioned the bridges and the Navy. At Coatings Pro, we write about a lot of these jobs. At AMP, we try and advocate for the professionals that take part in them. And I want to underscore how important it is to have solutions that work in real world jobs where sometimes it can be very dicey, it can be very intricate to get to the places you need to get to actually install that system. So when we're talking about these types of equipment, how important is it not just to have the right equipment, the right technology, but to make sure that it's portable and that the footprint is small enough that you can get it from, a main location to a tight job site? How do you all manufacture systems with that in mind?
Typically, like we'll get, like for example, it was a number of years ago. We did a job with the Navy where they had the aircraft carriers and they have to get the equipment in underneath the flight deck. So they, even though shipyards typically have lots of elevation, you can make it very tall. They couldn't because they couldn't get it into position. So they basically approached us and other people, and we were the ones that said we could do it. And we ended up getting the order. And what we made was a stackable system that ultimately had a patent to it, so that way we could take it in pieces and then stack it back up where they need it. Like I said, we had another small system where they actually had to take it into the work area through an industrial elevator that was only 6 feet tall, and we didn't have any forklifts or anything. So typically, we try to with the customer define what it is that they need, and then how can we configure our standard components to work in their specific application. Like we've done nuclear with nuclear grade filters, but that didn't require a rework. Like we've done very tall systems that are, well, yeah, actually had a system that's all in one piece, that's 30 foot tall. Everything that you need is all in one stack because that's what they wanted. And the complete, horizontal version of that is where we have a trailer. So what's really neat is by having the pneumatic conveying, having the better screening, that allows us to, handle the material more than once or twice if we need to and make it easy to handle. So by doing that, we can make it compact, we can make it fit what the customer needs, because again, the components all work together, to achieve the goal of, getting the customer customer what they need, and because of the unique designs and paying attention to the details. And like when we designed the pneumatic transfer, I mean, we wanted to do the very best we could do with that pneumatic transfer, not just make it to fit on this one piece of equipment, to make it universal to work everywhere. Our screens can work everywhere. Our magnetic drums, they work on magnetic grid and non-magnetic grid. So we individually design each piece for, a wide range, the widest range of installations and applications as we can, so that way when we put them together, they'll work together to make one system.
So if a contractor or an asset owner at a shipyard or a location like the ones we've been discussing is looking at upgrading their reclaim or blasting setup, what are the things that they should be looking for? And I guess as my closing question to you, where does Atlantic Design really deliver value that's unique in the marketplace?
Okay, yep. Again, we work with the end user or contractor to understand what is it that you need to get done and what resources are available. Do we have electricity? Three-phase electricity? Do we need it to be diesel? Do we need it to be all in one piece? Do we need it to be in multiple pieces? And then also, what's the performance or quantity of performance? How many nozzles do they want to blast with? And then how quickly do they need to clean that up? What's their sequence of operations? Some companies will blast for the shift, and then they'll clean up for a whole shift. Some of them they blast and clean up at the same time. So we need to kind of know that, because that'll let us know how much storage capacity we need, how much reclaim capacity we need, and then if there's any physical constraints. So we really have them, give us your wish list to start out of what you need. And then what ADI can deliver, I think, better than anyone else, is that we can come up with a solution that'll just nearly always, it has to match the physical requirements, because if you can't get it in the door, it doesn't matter how great it is. So we can always meet their physical requirements, and then hopefully then we can meet their performance, but we can get them through to the end of the job, whatever that takes. We do paint fume, filtration. We do, the HEPA. We do nuclear HEPA. And we can, like I said, we can do multiple transfers. Normally we clean in one pass, but if we don't have enough height, we can split that into 2 and 3 passes. But again, it's all standard components. So this way we can ultimately get the customer a solution, and hopefully it'll be the most economical.
Russell, for anyone listening that might want to learn more information from you guys, how can they do that? Basically, feel free to toss out your website, social media, email, any plugs you'd like. If someone listening wants to learn more about your solutions, what are the best points of contact for them to get started down that road?
Oh yeah, we're easy. I'm not necessarily easy to get a hold of, but our company is. And so we've got the 86. If you're old school and you use the phone, if we just want you to remember, call ADI, CALL ADI. So if you could remember that, you can go to the phone and hit 866 call ADI. What's that? 2255234. You can go to do a web search. If you do a web search for Call ADI, we've got that domain name for our website. That's also for all of our, we can also do that, with over the internet and the emails and stuff. And then we got, excellent salespeople here. We got EJ Gubin, Wayne Sutherland. There's more than just me. So you definitely, if you just call ADI, Atlantic Design Incorporated, on just about any media platform, you're going to be able to find us.
Good stuff. Russell, thank you so much for taking the time.
All right. Thank you.
Excellent insight there from Russell Roden, president at Atlantic Design. Russell mentioned where our listeners can learn more from them. And as far as us here at AMP Publications, the best place to get information are our websites, which you can find at coatingspromag.com or amp.org or materialsperformance.com. You can also search for AMP or Coatings Pro at your social media outlet of choice or your podcast home of choice, and find lots of great content pertaining to the coatings industry and the broader mission of materials protection and performance. All right, so with our plugs complete, we will adjourn for today. For Russell Roden and Atlantic Design, I'm Ben Dubose, news editor with the AMP Publications team. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for more new podcasts from AMP and Coatings Pro.